My name is Olivia, and I want to tell you about the night I found out I owned 20% of a company I had never heard of. When I was 18, my parents told me my college fund was gone because my older brother had found the one opportunity of his lifetime. 15 years later, that opportunity was collapsing, and it needed my signature to survive. What I didn't know that night, what none of us knew, was that the fund had never actually disappeared. It had just been hiding, quietly, inside the very company that was now asking me to save it. I was 33 when I finally understood what had really happened. For 15 years, I believed the worst part of my story was the money my parents took from my future. I was wrong. The worst part was learning exactly how many people had looked at what happened to me, understood it completely, and decided my silence was a small enough price to pay for their own comfort. If you've ever discovered that the people closest to you had quietly rewritten the story of your own life while you weren't looking, stay with me. Because by the end of this one, a lender, a lawyer, and a family that thought they'd already won are all sitting across a table from a woman they badly underestimated. Subscribe to Unheard drama stories before we start, because here, the people who were talked over finally get to finish their own sentences. The fund with my name on it. My grandmother started that fund the year I was born. Every birthday, she added to it, and every year she told me the same sentence like a small ritual. This is for your education. Not weddings, not cars, not emergencies. Yours. I believed her completely. By the time I was 17, I had been accepted into a strong accounting program, and I had already decided what I wanted to become: a forensic accountant, someone who followed money until it told the truth. I chose an in-state school specifically because I assumed the fund would cover it. I never once asked to see the balance. Why would I? It had my name on it. 2 months before my high school graduation, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. My brother Jason was 24 then, restless in the way 24-year-old men often are, convinced he'd found the one door that would change everything. He wanted to start a construction company with a friend from his gym. He needed equipment. He needed a cash reserve. He needed, as it turned out, exactly the amount sitting in my account. My father went first. "The bank won't take a chance on young men with vision," he said, like that sentence explained anything. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand, already softening the blow before she'd even delivered it. "College loans are normal now," she said. "You're academically gifted enough to recover from this." Recover from this. As if what was about to happen to me was a fall I would simply get back up from, on my own, with no help required from either of them. They had already liquidated the account. Nearly $70,000 gone to Jason before they ever told me it was happening. Jason hugged me that same afternoon and called me his first investor. He promised to repay every dollar within 3 years. I remember standing there in his arms, too stunned to say the one true thing, that I had never agreed to invest in anything. Nobody had asked me. They had simply decided, on my behalf, that my future was more negotiable than his ambition. I wish I could tell you I saw the pattern immediately. I didn't. When you've spent your whole life loving people, your mind does strange, generous work on their behalf, whether you ask it to or not. It searches for the innocent explanation first. It smooths the sharp edges into something softer. It calls betrayal a misunderstanding, because a misunderstanding still feels like something one honest conversation could fix. I kept waiting for that conversation. It never came. The life I financed myself. I went to community college during the day and worked the overnight desk at a roadside hotel to pay for it. Later, I transferred, picked up weekend bookkeeping work on top of everything else, and graduated with a stack of student debt that would follow me through most of my 20s like a second job I never chose. My parents came to the ceremony. They told relatives, with real pride in their voices, how impressive it was that I had worked my way through college. Nobody in that conversation ever mentioned why I'd needed to. Meanwhile, Jason's company grew fast. Family dinners quietly turned into celebrations of his courage, his risk-taking, his vision. He bought a truck first, then a lake house. Every single time I asked, gently, about repayment, he gave me the same answer. Every dollar had to stay in the business. My father told me more than once not to be petty while my brother was out there creating jobs. So I stopped asking. I told myself it was maturity. I know now it was fear, wearing a very convincing disguise. I became a certified public accountant and specialized in fraud examinations, which is its own kind of quiet irony. I spent my working hours tracing money that people believed no one would ever question closely enough to find, while my own family treated the disappearance of my education fund as an old misunderstanding that time alone should have already erased. For years, that was the whole story I told myself. A hard lesson, an unfair one but a closed one. I had no idea it wasn't closed at all. I had no idea the money hadn't just vanished into Jason's company, it had bought something. Something with my name quietly attached to it, sitting untouched in a filing cabinet for 15 years, waiting for the one night someone would finally need it. The phone call that should have warned me. 2 weeks before everything changed, my mother called me on a Tuesday night, which was unusual enough on its own. We normally spoke on Sundays, briefly, about nothing important. Jason's been under a lot of pressure, she said, in the careful tone she used whenever she was building up to something. The construction business, it's a tough industry right now. Is he okay? I asked, and I meant it. Whatever had happened between us, I never wanted him to fail. I just wanted once to matter as much as his success always had. He's fine, she said too quickly. We just think it would be nice if the whole family got together. A celebration. You've built such a beautiful career, Olivia, and we want to properly honor that. I remember sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, phone against my ear, feeling something I couldn't quite name yet. It wasn't suspicion, not exactly. It was more like the small, specific unease you feel when someone is far too kind to you right before asking for something enormous. I said yes anyway. Some part of me, even then, still wanted to believe the invitation was simply that, an invitation. The dinner invitation. 15 years after that kitchen table conversation, I walked into my parents' house expecting a celebration. Instead, I found an unset table, no smell of dinner cooking, and my brother sitting at the head of it beside a stranger in a gray suit and a stack of documents thick enough to need its own chair. "This is Marcus," Jason said. "He's our attorney." I actually laughed, not out of nerves, out of genuine confusion. "Our attorney? Jason, I don't have any part of your company." Marcus cleared his throat in the particular way people do right before they say something you will remember for the rest of your life. "Actually, Ms. Bennett," he said, "technically, you do." The room went very quiet. I looked at my mother. She was staring at her own hands. Jason explained it fast, the way people explain things when they need you to agree before you've had time to think. His company had lost 2 major contracts in the same quarter. He was behind on equipment payments. A lender had offered emergency refinancing, but only if every owner on record personally guaranteed the debt. "I'm not an owner," I said again, slower this time, like repeating it might make it true. Marcus slid a single page across the table toward me. "Your grandmother's fund," he said, "was never a simple savings account. It was a small trust. When your parents withdrew the balance 15 years ago, that trust used the funds to purchase a 20% stake in Jason's new company. In your name." I stared at that page for what felt like a very long time. 20%. 15 years. My name, typed cleanly into a legal document I had never seen, never signed knowingly, and never once been told existed. "They structured it that way," Marcus continued, quieter now, "to avoid admitting the original withdrawal violated the trust's own restrictions. You were 18. You signed a packet your father described to you as scholarship paperwork." I looked at my father. He did not deny it. He simply looked back at me the way you look at whether something that had happened to him, not something he had done. For 15 years, I had been listed, silently, as a minority owner of my brother's company, while every distribution, every dividend, every dollar of profit had gone somewhere else entirely. There is a very specific kind of loneliness in discovering that the people who know your softest places have been using that knowledge as a map, quietly navigating around you for over a decade. My first feeling wasn't anger. It was something closer to humiliation, the hot, sick realization that I had been this easy to manage the entire time. It took me longer than I'm proud of to remember something important. Trust is not the same thing as stupidity. The shame belonged entirely to the people who exploited it. Not to the 18-year-old girl who had signed what she was told was scholarship paperwork. "So," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, "you need my signature on a personal guarantee. For a company I apparently already own a piece of that I've never once been told about or paid a dividend from." "Family helps family," my mother said quietly. "Family told me the truth 15 years ago," I answered. "This is the first time anyone in this room has." I did not sign anything that night. I stood up, thanked Marcus for his honesty, which was more than anyone else at that table had offered me, and I left before dessert was even mentioned. The night I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark replaying 15 years of small moments I had trained myself not to notice. A subject changed too quickly at a holiday dinner. A nervous glance passed between my parents whenever Jason's company came up. A joke someone made once that had landed a little too close to a truth nobody wanted spoken aloud. Alone, each moment had seemed like nothing. Stacked together, in the middle of the night, they formed a picture I could no longer pretend not to see. My family had not made one mistake 15 years ago. They had made a decision, and then they had spent a decade and a half quietly protecting that decision from ever being questioned. And somewhere in that decade and a half, I had been the only person in the story who didn't know she was still part of it. By sunrise, I had stopped asking myself how I felt. I had started asking a different question entirely, the question that would end up changing everything that came after it, not what would keep my family comfortable, what would actually keep me safe. The records I already owned. I called an employment and business attorney of my own that same morning, a sharp, unhurried woman named Priya, who listened to the entire story without interrupting once, and then said the sentence I would repeat to myself for months afterward. "Do not sign anything. Do not confront anyone yet. We build this case with what is already legally yours." So that's exactly what we did. I requested the trust documents I was legally entitled to as a named beneficiary. I pulled 15 years of the company's basic ownership filings, all public record, all quietly confirming what Marcus had already told me at that table. I found the original scholarship packet I'd signed at 18, still sitting in a box in my closet, and read the fine print for the first time in my adult life, with a professional's eyes instead of a trusting teenager's. Everything matched. Every uncomfortable detail Marcus had said out loud in that dining room turned out to be true, and worse, provable. 2 days later, the lender's compliance office sent Jason's company a formal notice. The emergency refinancing offer required all owners of record, not just the ones who were convenient to remember, to be disclosed and to sign. My name, quiet for 15 years, had just become impossible to leave out of the paperwork. For the first time in this entire story, the outcome was no longer only my family's to decide. The phone call from Jason. Jason called me 4 times before I answered. When I finally did, his voice had none of the warmth from that dinner table. "You're going to sink the whole company over pride," he said. 200 people work for me, Olivia. Do you understand that? 200 families." "I understand it completely," I said. "That's exactly why I'm not signing a guarantee for a business I've never once received a dividend from, based on a document I signed at 18, believing it was scholarship paperwork." That was years ago. 15 of them, I said. And in 15 years, nobody once thought to mention it, until the night you needed something from me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, quieter, almost like the old Jason for half a second. "What do you actually want?" "The truth," I said. "Documented. And the people who work for you protected from what you did, even if you won't protect yourself from it." "The employees." The part of this that genuinely kept me awake wasn't my brother, or even my parents. It was the workforce. 200 people who had done absolutely nothing wrong, some with medical conditions covered by that company's insurance, some with a decade of their own lives invested in a business they didn't know had been built on a quiet, unresolved theft. I refused to let protecting myself become a performance of indifference toward them. I met privately with Jason's business partner, a man who, it turned out, had genuinely never known the true origin of my shares. Together, with independent counsel on both sides, we built a restructuring plan instead of a lawsuit. The company's profitable service division could survive, intact, if Jason surrendered operational control, sold the assets he'd purchased through company funds, and allowed an outside manager to take over daily operations. The lender agreed, in writing, to refinance without requiring my personal guarantee at all, as long as ownership and reporting were finally corrected to reflect reality. I agreed to support the plan on exactly 3 conditions. Every past distribution would be independently reviewed. My actual ownership would be formally, legally recognized, and employee wages would be paid in full before a single dollar went toward any family reimbursement of any kind. Jason rejected all 3 conditions, at first loudly. Then the equipment lender scheduled repossession for the following week. For the first time in his adult life, reality declined to negotiate with his pride. The signature I finally gave. I did eventually sign something, just not the document my family had placed in front of me that night at dinner. I signed a restructuring agreement that removed Jason as managing director, required full repayment across 5 years, and converted my hidden 20% into properly documented, protected ownership. I did not personally guarantee a single dollar of the company's debt. Jason sold the lake house within 2 months. He sold both vehicles not long after. My father quietly resigned from an advisory position at the company he had never once disclosed to me. Jason's business partner stepped in as interim president and kept nearly every employee on staff. My parents told relatives a very different story, that I had taken over my brother's business out of ambition. That version was easier for them than the true one, that I had simply stopped them from using my name, silently, for a 16th year in a row. I released one written statement to the family, and only one. I had not taken anything from anyone. I had required accurate ownership records, lawful accounting, and a plan that put 200 employees ahead of anyone's personal pride, including my own. After that, I stopped participating in any conversation about my character. There was simply nothing left to defend. What happened after? The company survived. Smaller now, steadier, professionally managed, with real financial reporting instead of family folklore standing in for it. I receive ownership statements now. Actual dividends. A vote, like every other member on record. I no longer attend family gatherings that are secretly business meetings, wearing a nicer outfit. My parents have never fully admitted the original transfer was wrong. They still prefer the phrase, "We made the best decision we could at the time," delivered with just enough softness to sound like an apology without actually being one. I stopped needing them to find the perfect sentence somewhere along the way. The legal record already uses accurate ones, and accurate has always mattered more to me than comfortable. The education fund, rebuilt. The first repayment arrived 9 months after the restructuring closed. I used part of it to finally eliminate the last of my student loan debt, the debt I had carried since the same year my brother received his equipment. I expected, honestly, to feel triumphant. Instead, I sat in my car outside the bank afterward and cried, quietly, for the 18-year-old version of me who had believed, for 15 years, that she owed the world something back for a theft that was never hers to repay. With the payments that followed, I created a small scholarship for students working their way through community college, exactly the way I once did. Applicants don't have to describe trauma or prove exceptional suffering or perform gratitude for a panel of strangers. They simply describe what they're building and what a single semester without financial panic would finally make possible for them. Jason works in sales now at the same restructured company he used to run. We are polite. We are not close. He has apologized, in his own way, though he still occasionally talks as if the business's near collapse was the reason our family fractured. The truth, which I no longer soften for anyone's comfort, is simpler than that. The break happened the exact moment everyone at that table decided my future was more negotiable than his ambition, 15 years before any of us ever said so out loud. The lesson I kept: surviving an injustice does not quietly convert it into a favor. Becoming resourceful after someone takes something from you does not mean they get credit for your strength. I learned that I could genuinely care about 200 employees, understand my brother's fear without excusing it, and still refuse to guarantee a debt built on choices I never made and was never even told about. Compassion, real compassion, has never once required my own self-erasure. Anyone who tells you otherwise usually benefits from you believing it. Some people will call your boundary cruel simply because your silence used to be so convenient for them. Let them say it. A peaceful life built on the truth might look smaller from the outside than the life you gave up to get it. But it feels infinitely larger once you're finally standing inside it, on your own 2 feet, with nothing left to hide and no one left to perform for. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been made to feel selfish simply for protecting what was already yours, I want you to hear this clearly. Love, real love, does not require you to disappear. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Unheard Drama Stories, because next week, someone else finally gets to tell you the part of their story no one else wanted to hear.